...2014 has been another standout year for the Islamic finance industry, with healthy growth coming from Islamic banks, but also a deepening sophistication of the Sukuk markets. I'm joined today by Mohammed Al Ardhi, Chairman of the National Bank of Oman, to discuss the next phase of the industry's growth. Mohammed, thank you so much for coming in today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, one of the big issues facing Islamic banks in particular is the issue of how they scale up their activities to become sort of a mainstream institution and offer mainstream services. How do you see this taking place perhaps over the next few years?
Thank you very much. I mean, as you said, you know, the Islamic banking, Islamic finance has done very well so far. 2014 being a very good year. The market went up to around $2 trillion. It is set to double in 2018. But we still don't have the HSBC type of the Islamic finance bank. And I think this is the opportunity for Islamic finance banks now to actually start doing and integrating into the financial system of the world, doing more business in London and in New York, mirroring, you know, what conventional banks are doing, but in the Islamic finance ethos and principles. We still, there's a long way, I think, to go for the experiment to do that. But looking at pricing, looking at interbank lending, looking at asset management as a whole, I think this is where Islamic banks need to look at to actually grow and be substantial in the finance world globally.
Now, you mentioned this idea of sort of tapping into markets in Europe and perhaps even the US as well. What do you think is required from Islamic institutions to really access these markets and go global?
I mean, I think the opportunity, I think, for Islamic banks is to actually appeal to the non-Muslim consumers in the world. 80% of the world are non-Muslims. And so I think what the Islamic finance carries of ethical principles, of socially responsible ethos is so appealing to everybody, not just the Muslim community. And I think people around the world is now more interested in this kind of banking, particularly after the you know, the experiences of 2008, 2009. There is no speculation, there is no derivatives, everything is done in the Islamic finance, is geared and is connected to the real economy in the world.
So as this sort of story of this ethical banking story emerges, you think this will be a catalyst for growth in new markets which perhaps haven't been tapped by the industry before?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it is, I mean, you look at, for instance, London is a very good example here. You only have to look at the landscape here, look at the Shard, Harrods, the Olympic Village. But not only the big financing stuff that has been done, small ones, you know, doing things with SMEs. There are many British banks now that do mortgages on Islamic financing. So it is, the exposure is getting better and better. And I think the more people know about it, more consumers understand the principles of it, it becomes more appealing. The experiment has been very good, I think.
Now, Mohammed, as this growth story unfolds, one of the key questions will be around regulation of the sharia-compliant financial sector. And obviously, we've seen in the past few weeks, Oman move to a centralized Sharia board. Now, how do you see the best way to regulate the Islamic finance sector, and what obstacles do you foresee taking?
I think Oman really was became a leader in this by doing this Sharia Council. And I think it is the future because with the Islamic finance, 90% of the fatwas and the products have consensus around throughout their jurisdictions. But there is always that 10% of disagreements, of not clear unclear things. This is where such as the Omani Council will be very important, because it will harmonize the procedures. It will also allow nationally, I think, the growth of a pool of scholars, of aligning with international bodies in the way we go forward with it.
Mohammed, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, James.